All right, everybody, we'll get started. It's a couple minutes after 3:30. Again, I thank you all for being here. I am so pleased that we can offer this very well air-conditioned room for all of you to sit in. I know it's beastly outside, though I haven't been out there since about 8:15. So a couple of reminders before we get started, and I see some new faces here. We do have microphones for everybody. The microphones on the tables do pick up and move. We are recording both the PowerPoint presentation and the audio, so if you could ask questions directly into the microphone, it'll make it easier for Raf here when he has to go through and splice everything together. And then for those of you in the audience, if you could come up to the podium and ask questions, that would be wonderful. We do have some snacks and water so everybody can stay hydrated and keep their blood sugar up. There are also postcards with some township information on it. When the next supervisor meetings are, we have a special email address set up specifically to handle questions regarding this program. If you don't have that, please pick one up. So for this meeting, specifically what we're going to be going over, I'll cover a couple of updates from our last meeting. We tried to incorporate as many of the comments that we received or the questions that we received into the information we're presenting today. We're going to go over the bulk of our credit program. We're going to go over the existing conditions analysis that we did for the stormwater infrastructure in the Penn Oaks neighborhood. And then we have an updated budget and a discussion that will go along with that. Our next meeting, and this is a change, our next meeting is not going to be in August, but it'll be Wednesday, September 18th, and that's to give staff a little bit more time with the next steps that we want to undertake. As an update from last month's meeting, one of the comments was, will it be possible for property owners to have access to what the township believes your impervious coverage to be for the property that you own? Yes, we will do that. Community development will work at setting up an application, a web application, where the link will be published on the township's website. And it'll basically pull up a map. Property owners can zoom into their properties, click on the property, and it will pull up your impervious coverage and essentially what we think the fee will be for your property. I don't think that this will be available for review by residents and property owners until around November 1st. We have some other things in the pipeline that will take us time to work through, and then also giving Raphael here the time to go through the analysis and make sure that everything's accurate so that we're not giving inflated numbers where we shouldn't be. And then we did add in, we received several questions from some residents. Will we count existing infrastructure, stormwater management infrastructure? Yes, there is a credit that's in the program now to count, to provide some sort of a benefit for existing stormwater management infrastructure that controls rate and volume. There will also be credits provided for existing tree canopy that's over existing impervious coverage. So it's not the perfect, you can't get credit for all of your wooded area that's not over parking impervious coverage, but there is something there. All right, so I'm just going to jump into the credit program components. Please, if you have a question, feel free to interrupt me. You can also save it for the end. That's fine. So just a quick review of the manual, and you all have a copy of the manual in front of you. If you don't, there are spares at the back table along with a draft budget for the program. So just to run through it really quickly, the appeal and credit application procedures can be found on pages 4 and 5. The definitions are on pages 6 through 8. Our actual credit policy and procedures are pages 9 through 10. And then the categories of users, which I'll review separately, are on page 12. And then really the bulk of the material for the credits are the structural and non-structural credits that are contained on pages 13 through 18. And then all of the applicable forms are following that. So the credit application process. So just to backtrack a little bit, the township is proposing a water quality fee. And to back up, the reason that we're proposing this fee is because of the unfunded mandate that we're getting from the federal and state governments with regards to water quality improvements we need to make and sediment that we need to reduce out of township waterways. We're implementing a credit program so that property owners can take advantage of projects they may implement that will improve water quality on their own, or like I'd said earlier, stormwater management that may already be in place on the property. We really want to encourage folks to be innovative and to, at the heart of all of this, want to help the township improve, both meet our MS4 requirements and improve water quality in the township and the Commonwealth as a whole. So that's really where this credit application comes from. And I will not take credit, and I mean that in a different definition, for development of this program. We did take this program from the model that Derry Township has in place and reviewed it, changed it where it made sense to change it, and left it as is for the most part. We didn't want to reinvent the wheel here if we didn't have to. One of the things we have yet to do, and this will happen in between this meeting and our meeting in September, is to follow back up with Derry Township and ask. They have this program that's been implemented in Derry Township since 2017. So they've got nearly a full 2 years of operation of the program, and we want to circle back with Derry Township to see what changes, if any, they have made to the credit application process based on their administration of the program. So the credit application process, there is a form in the back of that packet. You submit the credit application. Let's say you're doing a riparian buffer or a rain garden, or you're adopting an inlet. There is a 60-day review period for that credit application request where staff can schedule a pre-application meeting or conduct a field review and basically affirm everything that was put into that application. Design standards for BMPs must meet not only the Township Stormwater Management Ordinance, but also the Pennsylvania BMP Manual. I always think it's got a 2006 published date, but I'm not sure if they've updated it since then. And then one or more credits can be applied for up to a maximum of 45%. So for single-family residences, you can adopt an inlet. There's an opportunity to provide volunteer hours, and you can put in a rain garden. You can do any combination of the credits that you want to do to get up to a 45% discount essentially on your fee. Most of the credits in the program are going to be valid for a 5-year time period. Now with that, there's the caveat that we will be requiring self-certification of inspection by the property owner on an annual basis, and then the municipality, as part of its MS4 requirements, will follow up and spot check those self-certifications. A handful of the other credits, maybe such as the adopt an inlet or volunteer hours, those have to be reviewed and approved on an annual basis. There is a policy for termination of credits, which will occur only with written notice, and once the 60-day time period has lapsed for the property owner to mitigate whatever noncompliance was identified during an inspection that would lead to a termination of credit. And then, as I said, periodic inspections. So page 12 of the manual identifies the different types of users. Basically, these are the entities that can apply for a credit. So obviously, it's single-family residences can apply for a credit, and then non-residential users. The table on page 12 identifies credits or lists those entities that can apply for credits. So there is a EDUC, basically an educational entity. Any public or private educational system, K through 12, has educational credits that can be applied for. And also we're providing some credits for users, property owners that have their own industrial MPDES permit. I would guess Harley-Davidson has their own MPDES permit, so you can apply for a credit. I believe it's 20% or 15, I can't remember which. And also users that have their own MS4 non-municipal permit, and I'm not sure if the county qualifies there. If you have your own MS4 that's a non-municipal, there's a credit there that you can apply for. And then obviously, for our representatives from the school district, the educational component is important there, and the school district can apply for it. So just a real quick, Raph and I are going to run through the eligible activities, and these are the credit programs that can be applied for. So existing and proposed structural BMPs, so these are your basins, a 10% maximum credit for rate and volume each can be applied. So this is for your existing stormwater management infrastructure. In addition, there's a 25% maximum credit that can be applied for any water quality. And this is the percentages being taken off of your fee. So if your fee, let's say your fee is, I should do this so that the math is easy, it's $100, then you can get $20 off if you've got both rate and volume BMPs, and then $45 off if you've got rate, volume, and water quality BMPs. So you've got a basin and you've got a rain garden. We've got low impact parcels that have a 45% credit reduction. And page 13 has all three of the conditions that need to be met. And essentially this is set up for large property owners that have
It's large property owners that have the majority of their property is a permeable surface. So the condition 1 is that the property can only have 10% of that parcel can be of permeable material or impermeable material. It has to be 90% impervious. There's 2 other conditions. Reverse that.
Opposite.
Opposite, yeah. So 10% of it is impervious. Or impervious for 10%, pervious for 90%. That condition is solid. You can't change that at all. Conditions 2 and 3, there can be a little bit of leeway on those, and those are that the impervious area is not connected to the stormwater system, and that would be if you had a concrete swale running from your parking lot right into an inlet. That would qualify for condition 2, and then condition 3 is that the structures are not within 50 feet of a stream. However, if you look a little bit closer, it goes on to say that some of your impervious area can be within 50 feet of a stream, but if most of it is not, and it's the same thing with condition 2 with connectivity, if some of your impervious area is connected but most of it's not, then you still might be able to qualify for this low impact parcel. But for the most part, properties within the township, it's going to be the large residential lots within the northern part of the township, and some of the farms throughout the township are the primary ones who are going to be able to qualify for this.
Perfect, thank you, Raf. The next type of credit that can be applied for is public participation. A maximum of 15% can be applied for the public participation credit. This credit is transferable to nonprofits. So church congregations can pull together as a whole, and congregation members can submit or volunteer their own credit hours for the church to use. Specifically, those activities are going to consist of participating in a stream or roadside cleanup, participating in a township or other approved tree planting activity, hosting a student-sponsored educational event, participating in any other proposed public participation. And further on, we're going to talk about the budget that the draft budget that we've established. And as I identified in our first meeting, we are proposing 1.5 additional staff positions as part of this program. 1 full-time position will be dedicated for an MS4 coordinator, and essentially these are the activities that this coordinator would be handling. So establishing the opportunities, the township-sponsored opportunities for roadside pickups, for stream cleanups, for plantings, making sure that we're coordinating those opportunities with our nonprofit communities, with the school districts, with other residents. So that's sort of how I see the public participation flowing. There's also an adopt an inlet. 15%, 1 inlet per family, though you can adopt more. And essentially what we're looking for is for residents to maintain their inlets. Let us know if there's something wrong with the inlet. If we know that there's going to be a big rainstorm, please clean out the inlet. Make sure that debris isn't trapped there, because that contributes. There are several areas of the township where a clogged inlet creates 2 to 3 feet of flooding for a single property owner. And that would be helpful if we had more people helping us keep those clean.
And one thing to keep in mind with this is it is only for residential properties, so commercial properties cannot adopt an inlet.
Thank you, Raph. Rain barrels and downspout disconnection, and Raph, if you want to add a little bit there.
Yeah, so this is another one that if you have any downspouts that are coming out of off your property, feedback there. All right, any downspouts that are coming off your property and flowing into the street or stormwater system, you can disconnect those either through a rain barrel is probably going to be the most common one that we'll see, but you could also do a seepage pit or something like that to get that water infiltrating so it's not flowing at peak hours of the storm. You can apply for up to a 20% credit. It's going to depend on how many downspouts you have connected. If you only connect half or disconnect half of your downspouts, then you're not going to get the full credit. If you disconnect all of your downspouts, then you're going to be eligible for the full credit.
Thank you. We've got turf and landscape management as a credit, and essentially what we're asking, and this is both open to single-family residences and non-residential users, we're requiring that in order for this credit to be applied, a soil sample is sent to the Pennsylvania State Agricultural Analytical Services Laboratory for a soil fertility test. And what that is, it's a $9 test that's run, and they will give you recommendations for the fertilizing that you need to do for the condition of your soil specifically, so that you're not over fertilizing and you're not contributing to those nitrates and phosphates that are getting into the water. There are some additional requirements for non-residential users for that category. However, that's the bulk of it. As I hinted at earlier, separate MS4s and MPDESs can apply a 20% credit. And we have an educational credit. And the educational credit is discussed in broader detail on pages 15 and 16 of the manual. And essentially what we're asking for is for application of the credit, the educational program includes participation in water resource themes, student poster sessions, science fairs, take-home materials, classroom lessons, and field trips, etc. And all material to be approved or programs to be approved by the township prior to implementation. And that would be one of those annual credits that's reviewed with the school district.
I want to go back and talk about the NPDES and MS4 credits real quick. Those are not ones that you can specifically implement yourself. These are going to be things that if your organization's already meeting DEP requirements and are required to have an NPDES permit or an MS4 permit, you're going to get some credit for those because you're already helping the stormwater through your DEP requirements, but it's not something that if you don't have those, you can apply for.
Perfect, thank you. And then we have credits for more traditional activities such as a riparian buffer, which is basically a vegetated buffer along a creek or streamway. BMP easements. And this we need to work on a little bit more and fine tune the language in the manual. But essentially what the municipality will do is provide a 45% credit for any easements that are in already identified improvement areas for our MS4. So if it's a project that's in the, and right now currently for this permit cycle, more than likely our projects, our water quality projects are going to be on township owned land. So this will be a credit that we'll be looking for applications for in our next permit cycle for 2022 and 2023 to 2028. Where we anticipate having projects that will expand onto private property. For those private property owners in those project areas, a 45% credit on your stormwater fee can be applied if you're giving the township the easements necessary to complete that project. There's an urban tree canopy expansion credit of up to 45%. This one's based on the number of trees that it's both existing and proposed trees over existing impervious area. So say for instance for the Galleria Mall, there are trees within that parking lot, trees along the roadway. For non-residential users, the maximum credit is for 45% for 5 trees per ERU. and I'm not quite sure what the Galleria's ERU is, but it's 3,000 square feet of impervious coverage equals 1 ERU. So we'd be looking for 5 trees per ERU. For single-family residences, that number is obviously lower. 4 trees, existing or proposed, is a 15% credit. 6 trees is 25%, 8, 35%, 10, 45%. And then there are credits for pervious pavement, green roofs, and an innovation credit. Going back to the pervious pavement, it's not one of my favorites because of the seasonal issues associated with porous paving. If it's away from a street thoroughfare, anything that's treated with salt and cinders, then it'll work. So we still have to fine-tune some of that language because I'm not sure that pervious pavement or porous concrete is appropriate in every single situation because of the operation and maintenance. The cinders and the salt will clog that material and in essence make it impervious over time if it's not maintained appropriately. So essentially those are the credits that can be applied for, and that's the credit program. And before I moved on into budget discussions, I just wanted to see if there were any questions, concerns.
Is the school district automatically a 20%?
No, you have to.
You have to apply for it.
You have to apply for it, Ellen, and you have to, the township and the school district have to have a conversation about what those materials and those educational programs are going to look like. We want to make sure that you're meeting all of our requirements, which are DEP's requirements and EPA's requirements. And as long as that's being done, then yes.
And the staff that you're proposing to hire, 1.5 days, do you believe that they will be able to explain this program to the residents who are going to call about it?
They better be, or I would have made a bad hire.
Because
I mean, yes, they have to
I can see
be.
a whole lot I can see a whole lot of residents going, huh?
We will have a separate kind of rollout program, but yes, the staff will have to be able to adequately explain this program to residents, and I don't believe that will be an issue.
I'm just talking about the volume, not their understanding of the program necessarily, but I could envision most
I
of my
understand.
neighbors giving you, you could have calls that'll just be unbelievable.
And that's a really good question. I misunderstood what you meant.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. So when I started thinking about this program, that was one of the concerns I had. And in speaking with Derry Township, the concern was you must have been just swamped, almost drowning with appeals and questions. And their response was, and I think from a municipal standpoint, Derry Township's slightly larger than Springettsbury Township is, both from a population and from an actual size standpoint. But it was a lot of heavy lifting for the first 3 months or so. And then once they worked through all of the appeals, all of the credit applications, the workload became more manageable. So from a staffing perspective, my thought process from the long term, and I'm proposing the minimal staffing right now that I think is appropriate. So it might be a lot of heavy lifting for one person, and there might be some sharing of responsibilities with the existing staff. But from a long-term perspective, I, at this point, don't think that more than one full-time and one part-time is necessary for program administration. However, we still have several months of evaluation that we want to go through, and that's part of why we're not meeting in August. One of the things that we want to do is stress test both the budget and the credit program, run it through different scenarios, and make sure that we're not breaking the budget with something we've proposed in the credit program.
So what you just said actually was a question I had. So with all the credits available, where's the additional money going to come from to pay for the work?
So that's a really great question. Everybody has a draft budget at their table. Currently, right now, what I'm using is, you can see probably a third of the way down, there's a line item here for credit program, and it's got $333,500 in it. Does everybody see that? This is 23% of the overall budget. So essentially, at this point, what I'm averaging is that not everybody's going to be able to take advantage of the full 45%. On average, we're going to have about 23% of that. That'll be the average credit across the board is 23%. Again, we need to stress test that. I want to see, so for instance, for the Galleria, we want to know, how many trees do you have? And where are you at? Are you at 5 per ERU, and are we factoring that in appropriately? And we need to run these tests for all of the existing conditions yet to make sure that we're not, because certainly what we don't want to do is establish the fee and then realize that we're operating at a deficit and we need to increase the fee in a year. We do not want to do that. So that's our next step of the analysis. Does that answer your question?
Jess, the way you're trying to get credits for the BMPs that are existing, the basins, et cetera, are you assuming that you're going to subtract out the impervious coverage that's going to those basins to establish their ERU? Or are you going to give them a credit based on their overall impervious on a basin?
Second. So what I was going to do, it just seems simpler. We are absolutely open to recommendations, and nothing is set in stone, which is why we're having these meetings. But Jeff, what I would do in my head is calculate what the impervious coverage is. That gives you your ERU. And then if you've got basins that handle rate and volume, take that 20% off.
A follow-up question, in terms of establishing the amount of revenue that you need, you're assuming that you're meeting your PRP requirements and your MS4.
Yes, and I'll
lumped together.
Yep, I'll get into that. So are there any other credit program questions?
Are you going to start rolling out information on this to the public sooner rather than later?
The answer, so the township will start rolling out information as soon as we get the information adopted, that we need to have the programs adopted by the Board of Supervisors. I think from previous conversations that we had, we're hoping to have the policy manual and the budget adopted October timeframe is kind of the based on the draft implementation schedule that I put together.
And then mail that out all under separate cover to the township?
To township residents. And I'm not quite sure what that will look like. I was thinking in my head today, do I really want to mail all of the manuals to all of the residents? Probably not. I probably want to mail a letter with a link and then let people know that there are hard copies here at the office if people don't have access to internet.
I think public education is going to be your biggest
I
friend
agree.
or enemy if you don't do it right. I would think for your fall bulletin that comes out, there'll be a big whatever. Forget everybody's pictures on the front page. Forget your personal messages. Talk about this program.
There will be.
Did anyone see the article in the summer newsletter? Well, that's what I was putting on the inside cover of the front page, I have the township manager's article, and I started it off. Township is adopting a fee effective January 2020, and I have gotten a grand total of 0 calls or complaints or questions at the front desk since that newsletter came out the last week of May. And while we're going to do another newsletter article that'll come out the last week of August, if no one reads it, or if no one remembers it,
That's why I'm saying that you have to have multiple times in different forms, all over the place, mailings, whatever.
I can tell you from experience on the school board, nobody screens until they get their tax bill first week in July.
Right.
Well, we've been talking about it for 8 months.
And we're happy to take any suggestions that anybody has on how to distribute that information, but it's important to remember that none of this information will be distributed until we get board approval of it. And this advisory committee was an integral step in getting to the board in order to give the board the confidence that this had been vetted by more than just staff and our vendors, but that we had communicated with folks from the residential and business and other jurisdictions, governmental jurisdictions in the community.
Is this company that you hired going to be involved in that process for the $1.8 million or anything like that? This is going to be strictly up to the township staff
To manage your marketing.
We have not hired a company specifically for implementation of this program. This implementation of this program is being done by the township, by township staff. We are starting to go through contract negotiations from a construction standpoint.
Okay, it's a different animal.
But that's a different animal. And no, I've thought about involving them in this process, but honestly, I just don't think they really need to be. So all very good questions. Any other questions with the credit program?
One of the things that might be something just point out, in reference have a permit. Some places they have 2 permits.
Okay,
So like we do, for example, for
Okay.
groundwater, there was a permit for that, one for water. So
I would say maybe it's up to 20% unless you, I don't think you really want to give us 40%, but.
I think it's important, you know,
Is it 20% or is it up to 20%?
Well, ultimately, there's a 45% cap overall.
Yeah.
And if you could reach it in multiple ways, maybe, you could have 85% with credits, but you get 45%.
but that's still an excellent question. So while we go through the stress testing for this, that would be something that we would consider.
Partly again with that, it's up to 20%. I mean, we're saying 20%, and I think I might just change the language or the terminology.
because some of these, you know,
Are we really going to give them the 20%, or are we going to give them the 10%, or is it 15%, right? It depends upon what they submit and what they qualify for. Because somebody might,
It says, in the language, it says that it's eligible for a 20% credit. So I would not interpret that as being up to, if you can meet the requirements, it's a 20% credit.
so it's not going to be a 10%.
No, because it would be arbitrary. How would I?
So that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, from
I
a
honestly was
we want to
thinking.
stay away from anything that's arbitrary.
Okay.
It's-
Oh,
if
thank you.
we-
Okay.
You're welcome. That's more for our benefit. It makes our job easier.
Well, yeah, and that's why I was,
Yeah.
actually, thank you. Mhm.
Any other questions? Just to give everybody peace of mind, this is not the only time that we will provide an opportunity for questions. Everybody will, oh no. As you look through this document, not that I want to give anybody homework, but as you see things that may cause you concerns, please feel free to send us questions via that waterquality@springettsbury.com email. We will respond to those questions. We will catalog those questions. We will bring that information back to this group.
I can have one more question. Reference to the pervious pavement and the credit there, is that again looking at a certain size of an area for the pervious pavement?
It would have to be. So that's some of the things that Raphael and I still need to look into. So for instance, one of the questions I had going through the manual and kind of trying to push the boundaries of it was, if we're going to give folks a 10% credit for existing infrastructure that's in place, are we at all concerned about the drainage area that's going to that particular infrastructure? And does a larger basin get a larger credit versus a smaller basin? So the same would be true for the impervious coverage. Yes, I think amount should apply unless we find that we have no concerns about the impact of these credits on the budget, and that doing that would just create more work. But I can't answer that right now, but it is a concern, and we will be looking into it. So it's a partial answer.
I'm okay, and, to give more information as to why I asked, I know that when we did our southern property boundary area that was a transfer building, we were under an acre, and then part of that we had done was part of the parking area was pervious. Not just a small area, and for that to get 45% just wasn't
Sure.
fair.
Yep, I agree. That's a reasonable question.
Jess, in your budget projections here, does the budget that I see here for things like capital improvement, BMP construction, is that based off of what you projected you need to do for your DRP plan?
Yes, so that's an excellent segue into the next part of what I'm getting into. So from an existing condition standpoint, not all of the township neighborhoods have storm sewer systems. Say, for instance, the bottom of North Hills Road where it connects to Route 30. None of that residential neighborhood across the street from the elementary school has any stormwater infrastructure in the roadway. So what we did as part of this program was we've broken out all of the neighborhoods. So at the beginning of the year, we had a company televise all of the stormwater lines in the Penn Oaks Park neighborhood. Next year, we're going to focus on Haynes Acres, and we'll do the same analysis. Following that, we'll get into another, maybe Yorkland and Century Woods, and then the business community I think we'll do last. But essentially what we found here was that there was about 4,700 linear feet of storm sewer pipe that was in poor condition. And that poor condition is essentially stuff like this, rotting pipes. It's corrugated metal pipe that's been in the ground for 50 years. The bottom's absolutely rotted out. The pipe's being crushed. Water's getting into the ground. It's getting clogged up by roots and other debris. We also have cross bores that we've found in pipes. And so this is where another utility company bored underground to install a pipe, and they went right through some of our infrastructure. So those areas need to be fixed. We've done a preliminary analysis, and what the number that we have in our budget is based on slip lining 4,721 linear feet of stormwater pipe. Most of the lines that we televised that were in poor condition ran parallel to the roadway with the curbing as opposed to perpendicular. So to keep the cost down, we're more apt to slip line the pipe that's in poor condition that's running parallel with the roadway so that we don't have to rip up curbing and sidewalk, especially if that curbing and sidewalk is in relatively good condition. Conversely, if the pipe is running perpendicular and it's in poor condition, more than likely it's a smaller segment, it's less curbing and sidewalk that needs to be replaced, we would go for a full replacement of that pipe. So with this very preliminary analysis, I've taken the budget down. I think the budget that was presented in June had $500,000 in for operation and maintenance, basically maintenance and repair of our existing stormwater infrastructure. I've taken that line item down to $250,000. Now, I kept the budget the same at $1.783 million because what I did was created a capital improvements program line item, and I took the extra $250,000 that was in maintenance and repair and put that money into a capital improvements program. This is something that staff is proposing. It has not been approved by the Board of Supervisors. It hasn't even been presented to the Board of Supervisors. But the thought process here is that as we move forward, we will encounter more and more issues of stormwater pipes on private property. And right now, the stormwater fee doesn't contemplate the township repairing issues, stormwater management infrastructure issues on private property. It doesn't consider us purchasing easements or acquiring right-of-ways or long-term operation and maintenance of that infrastructure. However, I think that will become a necessary next step as everything is related. If we have a failure on someone's private property, it will create flooding downstream with other property owners and on township-owned roadways and other municipal property. So that's sort of the future direction that I see us going in. So that's where that new line item of capital improvements program is coming from. And at this point, I'd open the budget up. I don't want to review all of the line items with everybody unless you want me to run through them. But does anybody have any questions with what is represented on this draft budget and needs some clarification?
4,271 linear feet of pipe that needs repaired. Do you know what the percentage of that was, of what you surveyed? Or?
That's a really great question. I don't exactly. I want to say it's probably around 25%. I want to say that we had about, unless you know the answer to that question right off the top of your head, I want to say that when we worked on our budgets last year, my coordination with the Director of Public Works, I think in my mind, I want to say that we were working on an assumption of about 20,000 linear feet of piping total, but I can't say that with any sense of accuracy. So we can get that information and I can bring it to the next meeting.
Yeah, I mean, I was curious because, I just wondered if you could project out what you might anticipate for all the storm sewer systems you'll be reviewing in the coming years and how that works with your budget.
Yeah. I think, John, I defer to you. Do you think that's a reasonable number?
For any new pipes that a developer puts in a public right-of-way, they're concrete pipes, and they certainly have a much longer life. So we do have about 100 miles of roads, but if you go out to the glades and those areas, those don't have real drainage systems or significant drainage systems. So I would say, as a guesstimate, that 20% might be accurate. of what our inventory is now, but I don't think it's, until we get a little further down the road, we won't have an exact number. But that's one of the reasons why we've elected to go to concrete pipe, and a lot of developers complain about it because it's certainly more expensive to put concrete pipe in, but you saw the example of what happens to corrugated metal pipe over.
What do you mean by the contracted services?
So contracted services, items like compliance with EPA and DEP. So if we have an audit coming up, we might need some specialized services with a firm that specializes in water quality. If we need assistance with perfecting some of our MS4 program. Literally anything else that would come up that was outside of construction for BMPs and operation and maintenance, if there's some type of contract service that's necessary. Looking at it now, that number could be high, and I can revisit it and see if we can't bring it down some. Typically what I'd say though is 25 to 50,000 is appropriate.
Pollution reduction plan, which one of these line items is that covered by?
I'm sorry.
On your pollution reduction plan that has to be filed, that I assume you're doing in-house now, right?
Well, we will, with the help of the consultant that we're going to be contracting with. That's their job one.
Which one of the line items covers the construction for that activity? That's what I was trying to understand.
The BMP construction. It's all rolled into that. So we received a 1.8, 1.92. It was basically $2.71 per pound of sediment reduced, and that included the generation of a PRP that will be submitted to DEP. So all of that, those activities are included in the BMP construction number. And that BMP construction number is still high, because at this point, there's still a little bit of, I've got 500,000 in there for construction. We know that construction activities will be around $1.9 or so million. It's either going to be expended over a 5-year time period once we get the permit from DEP, or it'll have to be expended maybe in a 4-year time period. So right now that number for $500,000 is the max per year. I think that once we fine tune this and we begin our conversations with the consultant that we will be using, that number will be finalized, but we can't go more than that until we have those contracts in place, and that's all been reviewed and approved by the board. I did get one additional question from a member of the advisory committee, and that question was, what are the administrative expenses related to fee collection versus the fees collected from nonprofits? And I may have butchered the wording, but I think the question or the concern was, are we collecting a fee from the nonprofits just to pay for fee collection? Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm the one who was asking. The question is that the administration of this whole program, not actually doing the cleanup work, but the administration of the whole program, does it exceed the fees that we're having to spend to do that, to do something other than just changing the millage rate and just not having to do the compliance of all this, the appeals and all those other kind of things?
So I may or may not have answered the question sufficiently. I think it depends on what we're including as administrative costs. So only the $45,000 here represents only the administrative costs necessary to collect the fee. So the invoicing, the postage, and the personnel expenses to do that. There are additional administrative expenses that I can add in there, such as legal expenses, communication, liability insurance. But essentially, we have 168 tax-exempt properties in Springettsbury Township. On average, each one of those properties has 73,000 square feet of impervious coverage or more. 73,000 is actually the mean. And the fee generated from those parcels is a little over $200,000. So I think it would be...
Now, but then, like, for instance, the schools, you're going to have the educational credits and those kind of things, which are going to eat into that. So that's kind of where I'm trying to understand the whole. I mean, and that's good to get an understanding of this is, and the administrative, if you're having all the residents coming in asking how is this, and the staff time going into appealing things and explaining all that, that all goes away if you just change a millage rate.
Right.
And are you better off, or have you really just, grown the administrative component and things and really not financially better off? I don't know the answer, just I think that's something to quantify.
And we can certainly, I can look into that a little bit more based on what you had just said now. But the other part of this, Kevin, that's really important is there's a lot of education involved here. So what this fee is requiring is that every single property owner familiarize themselves with the MS4 program, understand that water quality is the responsibility of all of the residents. If we turn this into a tax, we lose some of that. But I also, and this is just my opinion, every single property owner that has impervious coverage on the property that they own, all of that water is at some point being funneled to a municipal street, which is then being funneled into the municipal, into the MS4 system. It's essentially a utility that's being utilized by everyone. And I think based on that comparison, a fee is more appropriate than a tax, because the fee goes to all of the users as opposed to a tax, which won't. But we can dig more into that question and try and quantify or qualify where we're at with the costs for administering the program versus what we'd be getting in, considering the credits.
Well, at least figure out that we're not getting worse off in the process.
Not worse.
And that you're spending $300,000 to collect $200,000.
And this illustrates, bringing in 203 versus 45 to make sense.
Yeah. The next steps, like I said, our next meeting will be September 18th. The reason I pushed this off was to give township staff the time to dig into this credit system, to stress test the budget numbers and the credit numbers and how these are going to be applied, specifically with regards to existing conditions. We will then, that also gives all of the advisory committee members time to vet the documents that are in front of you, review them with folks from your different areas, and then get back to us with questions. At the September 18th meeting, we'll go over the changes that staff's recommending as a result of our stress testing, the changes that different members of the advisory committee have recommended, and then our implementation schedule. And the implementation schedule will cover when we think the board will approve the policy and procedure documents, the resolution to establish the program, and what the overall fee schedule will be, and then implementation then of when people should expect to receive invoices and so on and so forth, so more of the particulars. Again, really important for anybody who wants to voice their concerns overall about an additional fee being assessed to property owners. Springettsbury Township Board of Supervisors is meeting July 25th, August 22nd, and September 12th and 26th. Those are all Thursdays. Exactly at 7 p.m. we start, and public comment pretty much starts right after we start the meetings at 7 p.m. And I would encourage everybody here, if you have a concern, an issue with just assessing another fee overall, to please speak out during one of those Board of Supervisor meetings. And then outside of that, if you have any other questions, our information is here. Like I said, we have a separate email established to receive questions and comments regarding this program. We will interact as much as possible. I've checked it once a week. I haven't received any emails. I will certainly check the inbox more frequently if we get responses, but so far I have yet to have anybody send me an email to waterquality@springettsbury.com.
And you're not going to put any of this up on the website until it's been approved by the supervisors? Is that what you're saying, like this?
No, the presentation will go on the website because this is a public meeting, and the audio will go on the website. But really, Ellen, I'm not comfortable putting up any draft documents until the board approves it.
I agree with you. Okay, and you'll let us know when it does go up on the website?
Yes.
Like I forwarded that to our...
Yep, absolutely, just like I did the last time. And if anybody hasn't seen it, there is a link to the June meeting with the audio. And I thank all of you for being here and taking time out of your busy days. We really, really appreciate it.